The knife is already at his throat before anyone in the room even blinks. Not a guard's knife, not an enemy's, mine. And the man choking on his own breath right now, the man whose face has gone white as a funeral shroud, is Lord Dorian Solcrest, fourth son of the Solcrest ducal house. One of the most powerful noble families in the entire Athon Empire. A man who, roughly 30 seconds ago, was laughing at me in front of a full banquet hall, calling me a waste of bloodline, a stain on noble society, a broken sword that couldn't even hold its own edge. 30 seconds! That's all it took for the entire room to go dead silent. And here's the thing. Here's the part that makes this moment absolutely insane. To everyone in this room, I'm Dorian Solcrest, 12 years old, the youngest son, the one nobody bothered to name on the family crest because why waste the ink? The runt, the disappointment, the boy who can't even manifest a basic mana core, according to every test the family has thrown at me since I turned 7. They have no idea. They have no idea that 3 days ago, from my perspective, I was standing on the highest rooftop in the Empire's capital, watching my last target bleed out, finishing a job that had taken me 6 months of preparation. They have no idea that I died that same night, betrayed by the very organization I had given my entire life to. They have no idea that the man pressing himself against the banquet chair right now, terror leaking out of every pore, is looking into the eyes of someone who has killed over 300 people. I'm 12 years old, and I remember every single one. I release him, slowly, calmly. Let the knife disappear back into my sleeve like it was never there. Varen collapses forward, gasping, knocking his wine goblet sideways. Red liquid spreads across the white tablecloth like blood. Nobody moves. Nobody speaks. I smooth my jacket, turn around, and walk back to my seat at the far end of the table, the end where they put the children and the servants, and I sit down. I pick up my fork. I start eating again. The silence lasts another 4 full seconds before my father's voice cuts through it. Dorian, Duke Harvin Solcrest, 53 years old, silver-streaked hair, military posture, and eyes that have always looked straight through me like I wasn't there. He's standing up now, his chair pushed back hard. His expression isn't angry. That would almost be easier. His expression is confused. Like I am a puzzle piece that has appeared in a box that wasn't supposed to contain me. Explain yourself. I look up from my plate. I meet his eyes, and for the first time in either of my lives, I hold that gaze without flinching. Because I spent 15 years being the ghost of this empire. I've stood in front of kings. I've watched generals beg. I've sat across from monsters and eaten my dinner while they burned. Harvin Solcrest is not a monster. He's just a man who never looked closely enough. Lord Varen insulted the Solcrest name, I say. My voice comes out calm, too calm for a 12-year-old. I watch several people at the table register that wrongness. I addressed it. Dead silence again. Then Varen, still catching his breath, slamming his hand on the table. He put a blade to my throat. The little wretch put a blade to my... With a butter knife, I say. More silence. Varen blinks. Looks down, realizes. His face goes from white to red so fast I'm almost impressed. It was the closest thing available, I add, and go back to eating. And that right there, is the moment where my second life begins in earnest. Not with a grand declaration, not with a system notification, not with a hidden power awakening and a dramatic flash of light, but with a butter knife and a room full of nobles who suddenly don't know what to do with the child they spent years forgetting. Let me back up, because to understand why I'm here, in this body, at this table, in this life, you need to know what the first one cost me. My name was Rion. Just Rion. No family name, no house crest, no noble lineage. Orphaned at 5, recruited at 6 by the Veilborn, the Empire's most secretive and most dangerous assassination organization, operating in the shadows underneath every throne, every war, every political marriage in Athon history. They took in children with no names and no futures, and they gave us a purpose. A brutal, efficient, lethal purpose. I was good at it. Better than good. By age 19, I was the Veilborn's ranked first blade, their cleanest kill record, their most requested contractor. They called me the Null, because I left nothing behind. No witnesses, no evidence, no trace of emotion. Just the absence of whoever needed to be absent. For 15 years I served them. I believed in what they told me, that we were balancing power, that we were the invisible hand keeping the Empire from tearing itself apart. That every life I took was a chess piece being removed so the board could stay clean. It was a lie. All of it. I found out the truth at 31, 3 months before my death. The Veilborn wasn't balancing power. They were consolidating it, building towards something I still don't fully understand. And when I started asking questions, when I started digging, they decided it was easier to remove the piece than answer for the board. They sent their second-ranked blade after me. My own successor. The girl I had trained. She almost won. Almost. And then I woke up here, 12 years old, in the body of Dorian Solcrest, the youngest, most forgotten son of a noble house I had once been hired to surveil during a political crisis. Back then, I had spent 6 weeks studying this family from rooftops and shadows. I knew their routines, their secrets, their weaknesses. I knew Duke Harvin's love for his late wife and his cold distance from the children who reminded him of her. I knew the eldest son Calyx was brilliant but cruel. I knew the second son Evander was soft-hearted but spineless. I knew the daughter Mira was the sharpest mind in the house, and the most dangerously underestimated. And I knew that the youngest son Dorian had been quietly, systematically ignored, since the day he turned 7 and failed to awaken a manicore. Here's the thing about manicores in this world. Every noble child is supposed to manifest one by age 10. It's not optional, it's the foundation of magical aptitude, of combat ability, of everything that matters in Aethon society. A noble without a manicore is a scandal, an embarrassment, a mark of bad blood that the whole family carries. Dorian had failed his awakening test at 7, and again at 8, and again at 9. 3 failed attempts, unprecedented in the Solcrest house. So they had quietly shuffled him to the back of every room, the end of every table, and decided he was a problem they'd rather not look at. They didn't know what I know. I've spent 15 years in a world where the Veilborn trains its assassins to suppress everything. Every emotion, every energy signature, every trace of power that might give you away. We were trained to be invisible not just physically but spiritually. And I am so thoroughly, fundamentally suppressed, so deeply trained to hide every flicker of what I actually am, that even the Empire's most advanced mana detection instruments can't find it. Dorian didn't fail his awakening tests because he had no core. He failed because his core was so thoroughly hidden that even he didn't know it was there. And now I'm in control of that body, and I know exactly where every piece of it is. But I'm not showing anyone. Not yet. Not until I understand what I'm walking into. Because here's the thing about waking up 12 years in the past with the memories of a professional assassin. The temptation is to move fast, to fix everything immediately, to expose every secret, flip every table, make everyone who ever wronged you regret it in one spectacular moment. That's what amateurs do. I am not an amateur, so I play it smart. I spend the first 2 weeks after my regression just watching, cataloging, remembering everything I observed during those 6 surveillance weeks in my first life, and comparing it to what I see now. Who's different? What's changed? What hasn't changed at all? The household dynamics are exactly as I remembered. Calyx, the eldest at 22, is already developing the cruel streak that will eventually make him a liability. He runs the training yards with an iron fist and has a habit of making examples out of servants who disappoint him. Nobody challenges him because he's the heir, and in this family, the heir's word is law until the Duke says otherwise. Evander, the second son at 19, is doing what he always does. Trying to mediate, trying to smooth everything over, smiling at the right people and agreeing with the wrong ones because conflict makes his stomach hurt. In my first life, Evander Solcrest became a minor administrative official who spent 30 years pretending he didn't know the things he knew. I have more respect for him than for Calyx, but not by much. Mira is 20. She's the one I actually need to be careful around. In my first life, I had pegged her as sharp, but I didn't understand the extent of it until now, watching her up close. She notices things, small things, the kind of things that only matter if you're building a picture, and she keeps looking at me with this expression I don't quite recognize. Not pity, not irritation, something more like cautious curiosity. She's already sensed that something is different. I file that away. Then there's the banquet. 2 weeks after my regression, Lord Dorian Solcrest, a cousin from the secondary Solcrest branch in the northern province, arrives for a routine visit. He's 35, overfed on his family's status, and has built his entire social identity around reminding everyone beneath him exactly where they stand. I know the type. I've killed 3 people exactly like him in my first life. Two of them were also 35, which I'm starting to think is when certain men peak in their own self-importance. The banquet goes fine for the first hour, then Varen gets comfortable with the wine, and comfortable with the audience, and starts making remarks. First about the state of the household, then about the children, then specifically about me, the child who can't awaken a core, the family shame, the youngest son who isn't worth training space. In my first life, I imagined 12-year-old Dorian just sat there and took it, stared at his plate, went quiet. Because that's what he had been trained to do by years of being everyone's afterthought. But I'm not that Dorian. And when Varen said the line about how the Solcrest blood must be thinning if it can produce something as useless as the little one at the end of the table, something in me went very still. Not angry, cold. The cold I know well. The cold that means a decision has already been made somewhere behind my eyes, and my body is just waiting for the moment to execute it. The butter knife was the closest thing available. I want to be clear, I would never have actually hurt Dorian Solcrest. He's not a target. He's not worth the paperwork, but the pressure point on the throat, the specific angle that makes a person feel like one more ounce of force will end everything, that's muscle memory. That's reflex. That's 15 years of my first life expressing itself through a 12-year-old's arm. And the room saw it. That's what matters. After the banquet, the fallout is exactly what I expected. Duke Harvin summons me to his study. He's standing at the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking at the evening lights of the estate grounds. He doesn't turn around when I come in. The silence stretches for a long moment. "Where did you learn that technique?" he says finally. "The pressure point? The entire thing. The movement, the control. Children do not move like that." I consider my options for about half a second. "I studied the household archives," I say. "We have extensive combat records. I've been practicing." Another long silence. He still doesn't turn around. "You've been practicing, in secret. You weren't watching." That lands. I see his shoulders tighten almost imperceptibly. He's not used to being spoken to that way. And he's definitely not used to it from the child he stopped watching. He turns around finally, looks at me, really looks at me, for what might be the first time in years. And I look back without fidgeting, without dropping my eyes, without doing any of the small submissive things that 12-year-old Dorian would have done automatically. "You will report to the training yard tomorrow," he says at last, "at dawn." "Yes, sir. And you will tell no one what I am about to assess." I nod once, and I leave. The next morning, dawn, training yard. Harvin is already there when I arrive, along with the household's head instructor, a retired Imperial soldier named Sergeant Breck, who has a scar running from his left ear to his jaw, and the kind of eyes that have seen enough violence to stop being impressed by it. He's standing to the side with his arms crossed, watching. Harvin points to the center of the yard. "Show me." So I do. Not everything. Definitely not everything. I'm still working with a 12-year-old body, still recalibrating motor memory to shorter arms and lighter bones and lungs that haven't fully grown yet. And I'm absolutely not going to reveal the mana core I've been slowly, carefully unlocking every night in my room while everyone else sleeps. But I show them enough. Basic footwork that isn't basic at all to anyone who knows what they're seeing. Hand speed that doesn't track with a child's reflexes. Body control that suggests something deeply ingrained, not recently practiced. I spar against a training dummy for about 2 minutes, and then I stop. Because I can feel Breck starting to calculate, and the last thing I want is for a retired Imperial soldier to start doing accurate math on my capability level. Harvin and Breck exchange a look. "How long?" Harvin asks. "Years," Breck says. Harvin looks at me again, and this time there's something in his expression I haven't seen before. Not pride, not warmth. Something more complicated, like a man realizing he misplaced something valuable a long time ago and isn't sure he deserves to find it. "You'll train with Calix's unit from now on," he says. "Not as the youngest son, as a recruit. You'll have to prove your place." "I understand. Calix won't go easy on you." "I know." A pause. "Are you certain you want this?" I look at him. "I want a lot of things, sir. This is just the first one." That stops him cold. He doesn't answer. He just turns and walks back inside, and Breck gives me one long, measuring look before following, and I'm left alone in the training yard with the early morning air and the quiet sense that I have just moved my first piece on this board. The first week in Calix's unit is exactly what I expected, and nothing I'm worried about. Calix Solcrest is good. He's genuinely talented, and more than that, he's had the best instructors money can hire since he was 6 years old. He moves well, he thinks fast, and he has the particular confidence of someone who has never in his life been outclassed in a room. He's about to have a new experience, but I pace myself. That's the rule. That's the fundamental discipline of everything I know. You never show your full hand in the first week. You let them build a picture of you that you control. In the training yard, I match roughly 60% of what Calyx can do. Enough to be clearly competent, not enough to threaten him. He's suspicious anyway. You failed your awakening 3 times, he says to me, on the 3rd day, after a sparring session. His tone isn't hostile exactly, just pointed. How are you doing this? Determination, I say. He stares at me. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He stares for another moment, then turns and walks away, and I can see from the set of his shoulders that I've annoyed him. Good. Annoyed is manageable. Annoyed is predictable. Annoyed people keep watching you because they want to find the flaw. I don't have flaws I can't control. Here's something worth understanding about how this family works. In the Solcrest house, respect is a currency, and it only flows one direction, down. The Duke's word is absolute. Calyx inherits that authority as the heir. Everyone below knows their place and guards it jealously. It's a closed ecosystem, perfectly designed to keep the strongest person in permanent authority and crush anything that might challenge that order before it fully develops. I've operated inside closed systems my entire first life. I've dismantled them piece by piece, from the inside, so many times that the pattern is practically reflexive. First, establish you exist. That happened at the banquet. Second, establish you're competent. That happened in the training yard. Third, demonstrate value that the system didn't know it needed. I'm working on the 3rd part now. It's the 4th day when the first real test comes. One of the older trainees in Calyx's unit, a 17-year-old named Seth, built like a young ox and with about as much subtlety, decides that the youngest son playing at soldier needs to be put back in his place. During the afternoon training session, when the instructors are occupied at the other end of the yard, Seth and 2 of his friends box me into a corner near the equipment racks. "Lost, little lord?" Seth says, grinning. Behind him, his friends spread out slightly. An unconscious flanking formation. They've done this before, probably to smaller or weaker targets. It's sloppy but functional. I look at Seth. I look at the 2 behind him. I map the distances between us, the angles, the equipment racks, the nearest exit, the exact position of everyone else in the yard. All of that takes about 1 second. Not lost, I say, but I'd like to get past you. Seth's grin widens. He reaches out to shove me. That's how these things always start. The first shove is the signal. It says I'm in control here. It says you'll accept this. It says you're the kind of person who stands still while someone pushes you. I've never been that kind of person, even before I knew what I was. I step sideways, not dramatically, not with a flourish. I just step sideways, and the shove hits nothing, and Seth stumbles forward half a step from his own momentum, and before he can recover, I've moved around him to the left, and I'm past the group and walking toward the water station like nothing happened. Silence behind me. Then Seth makes the mistake of trying again. He comes at me from behind, not a shove this time, a grab, both hands reaching for my collar, and I don't think about it, I just move. I drop my weight, redirect his arms, use his own forward energy, and a moment later Seth is on the ground looking up at the sky with an expression of profound confusion on his face. I didn't throw him hard. There was no crack of impact. He's not hurt, he's just down. The rest of the training yard has gone very quiet. Calyx is standing at the far end. He's seen everything. His expression is unreadable. Seth gets up slowly, looks at me. For a moment, I genuinely can't tell which way this will go. Then something shifts in his face. Not quite respect, but the early architecture of it. And he says, "Okay, just that. Okay, and that, more than the banquet, more than the meeting with Harvin, more than the first training sessions. That's the moment the unit starts to rearrange itself around me. Not dramatically, slowly. The way power actually moves in closed groups, one person at a time shifting their sense of the room. Calyx notices. Of course he does. He corners me that evening, outside the east wing. "You're not what I thought," he says. "I get that a lot lately. I don't like surprises in my unit." "Then you should know," I say, and I look at him directly, "that I'm going to keep surprising you, not to cause problems, but because I'm going to be better than anyone expected, and there's no way to do that quietly." He looks at me for a long moment. Then he says something that surprises me. "Good. Just that." Good. Then he walks away. I didn't expect that. I expected rivalry, defensiveness, the standard eldest son territorial response. Instead, I got something that sounded almost like challenge accepted. I file that away too. Calyx is more complicated than I remembered from my surveillance years. That could be useful. It could also be dangerous. 3 weeks pass, and then everything gets complicated. Because I find something. I find it by accident, actually. Late one night, while I'm doing my usual rounds of the estate, a habit I can't break even 12 years removed from my first life, the old instinct to know every exit, every shadow, every place where someone might be hiding, I hear something that doesn't fit. A voice. Low. Careful. Coming from the old groundskeeper's shed on the property's eastern edge, well away from the main house. I shouldn't investigate. I know that. A 12-year-old with any sense of self-preservation should hear an unusual voice in a dark shed and walk in the opposite direction. I do not have self-preservation instincts. I have curiosity instincts, which are honestly worse. I get close enough to hear without being seen. There are 2 voices. One belongs to a man I don't recognize. The other belongs to someone I do. Evander, my second eldest brother, the soft-hearted one, the one who smiles and agrees and tries to smooth everything over. The one I thought was spineless. He doesn't sound spineless right now. He sounds urgent. He sounds afraid. And what he's saying, what he's passing to the man I don't recognize, in hushed and rapid words, is information about the Solcrest estate, its defenses, its guard rotations, its hidden vault locations. He's selling it, not to a rival noble house. I can tell from the snippets I catch that it's worse than that. He's selling it to a faction I know well, because I spent 3 years monitoring their movements in my first life before being reassigned. A faction called the Thornwatch, a political military organization operating in the Empire's eastern territories, supposedly dismantled 6 years ago, very much not dismantled in reality. In my first life, the Thornwatch had been one of the Veilborn's long-standing contractors. We moved information for them occasionally. I never liked it, and now my soft, spineless brother is in bed with them. I sit with this information for 2 days, which is 2 days longer than I would have taken to act in my first life, because in my first life I would have made a decision immediately and executed it without hesitation. But I'm 12 years old in a noble house with a delicate position and a very specific game I'm trying to play. And acting rashly right now would blow up everything I've been building. So I think. And then I act. I go to Mira. Of all the Solcrest siblings, Mira is the one I've been most carefully managing my distance from. Because Mira notices things. Because Mira has been looking at me with that cautious, calculating expression since the banquet. And because if I'm going to bring her information this explosive, I need to be absolutely certain of which way she'll take it. I catch her in the library the morning of the 3rd day. She's reading trade reports, which is not something most 20-year-old noblewomen do for fun, and that alone tells me everything I need to know about which Mira I'm dealing with. I sit down across from her without being invited. She looks up, not surprised. She closes her book with careful precision. "You've been watching me," she says. "You've been watching me too." A pause, then the corner of her mouth moves. Not quite a smile. "Fair. What do you want, Dorian?" "I have information. I need someone I can trust to help me know what to do with it." "You could take it to Father." "I could. But Father has a tendency to act before understanding, and if he acts wrong here, it costs everyone." She looks at me for a long moment. "You sound very old for 12. "I feel very old for 12. Another pause. Something in her expression shifts. That cautious curiosity becoming something closer to decision. "Tell me." So I tell her. Not everything. Not about who I am, not about my first life, but about what I heard in the shed, about Evander, about the Thornwatch, about the guard rotation information that had been passed between them. Mira doesn't react visibly. She processes. I watch her process. The small movements around her eyes, the almost invisible tension in her jaw, the moment when she reaches a conclusion and her whole face goes still. "How long have you known?" she asks. 3 days. "Why come to me?" "Because you'll think before you act. Father won't." She looks at me steadily. "You realize what this means. If we move on this wrong, Evander could be executed. Whatever his reasons, the Thornwatch contact alone is enough. I know. And you still brought it to me rather than letting it go. I'm not the type to let things go." She stands up. smooths her dress with the automatic precision of someone who has spent years managing every physical detail of their appearance as a form of control. "Give me a week," she says. "I need to understand why he did this before we decide what to do." "A week is fine, but be careful who you lean on for information." She gives me a sharp look. "I know who I trust in this house. Right now," I say, "the list should be very short." I leave her with that, and I go back to training. The week Mira takes is the most tense week I've spent since waking up in this life. I continue training. I continue carefully, precisely outperforming expectations, without outperforming the point of suspicion. My mana core, which I've been secretly cultivating every night for 4 weeks now, is starting to unlock at a rate that surprises even me. The core itself isn't small, it's enormous. It's just been buried under layers of suppression so deep that unlocking it feels less like a discovery and more like an excavation. At night, in my room, with every sensing ward I know disabled and the door sealed, I push a little more, draw a little more, let a little more of it breathe. It burns, but I've been burned before. On the 6th day, Mira comes to find me. Her expression is controlled, but her eyes have the particular flatness of someone who has confirmed something they were hoping wasn't true. "He owes them money," she says quietly. "A debt he accumulated 3 years ago when he tried to invest in a merchant venture that the Thornwatch quietly owned. They've been calling it in." I process this. Is he compromised because he wants to be, or because he's trapped? The second, he's terrified. And the information he passed, how much damage? If they act on the guard rotations and vault locations, they could empty the estate treasury in a single night, and we'd lose 6 guards before anyone raised an alarm. That's bad. That's genuinely bad. When are they planning to move? I don't know. But the contact meeting was a signal. It means they're close. I think for a moment. Then I make a decision. "I can handle the contact," I say. Mira stares at me. "You're 12. The contact doesn't know that. And what I need isn't a fight. I need a conversation. Dorian, I've done harder things than talking to a mid-level Thornwatch operative," I say, and then I realize how that sounds from a 12-year-old's mouth, and I add, "Or at least, I've read about enough of them in the archive records to have a working model." She looks at me like she doesn't believe a word of that. She's right not to. But after a long moment she says, "What do you need from me?" Eyes on Evander. "Keep him calm. Keep him talking to you. If the contact tries to reach him before I get there, stall. And if this goes wrong, it won't." She doesn't look convinced, but she nods, and that's enough. The contact meets at the same shed 3 nights later. I know because I've had it under watch. Old habit, effortless execution. And when I see the signal lamp flicker at the groundskeeper's window at 2 in the morning, I'm already in position. Those 3 nights of waiting are some of the strangest I've spent in this second life. There's something deeply disorienting about lying in a 12-year-old's bed in a well-furnished room in a noble house, staring at the ceiling, running operational calculations through a mind that spent 15 years in the field. I think about what Renner, or rather, what some future version of an operative like him, might do if I move wrong here. I think about every exit from the shed, every likely weapon the contact carries based on Thornwatch operational doctrine I know from my first life's surveillance work. I think about the exact pressure point in a negotiation where you say just enough to make withdrawal seem like the smarter choice, and not a single word more. And then I think about Evander, asleep somewhere in this house, carrying a secret that's slowly crushing him. Not because he's a traitor at heart, because he was scared, and because scared people make deals with whoever promises the fear will stop. I've seen it 100 times. I've ended contracts on people exactly like him. It's different, knowing the person. I don't sleep much those 3 nights, but I use the time well. I don't wait for Evander to arrive. I go in first. The man waiting inside is compact, weathered, mid-40s, with the balanced weight distribution of someone who fights professionally. He's sitting on an overturned crate with the loose patience of a man who does a lot of waiting. He looks up when I come in, and his eyes do a very quick and professional assessment that tells me he's genuinely good at his job. Then he processes that I'm 12 years old, and a flicker of confusion breaks through the professional mask. "Who are you?" he says. "Someone who knows what you're doing here," I say. I close the shed door behind me, and someone who's offering you a choice. He shifts. His hand moves toward the knife at his hip. Old instinct. "Don't," I say. Not as a threat, just as a statement of fact. If I wanted to hurt you, we wouldn't be having a conversation. The hand stills. He's reassessing. Good. "The Thornwatch is using Dorian Solcrest as an information source," I say. "That's done. He's not available to you anymore. The question is, what happens next? Bold talk from a child. I'm Solcrest family. If you move on this estate using information from a compromised source, you will have every blade in the Solcrest network tracking your organization. That's not a small thing. I hold his gaze. Or you walk away. You take the debt Evander owes and you write it off as a cost of doing business. The Thornwatch loses a small piece of leverage they probably weren't planning to use cleanly anyway, and in exchange, the Solcrest family never knows you were here. He looks at me for a long time, a very long time, and I know what he's doing, because I've done it myself in 100 different rooms. He's calculating. Risk versus benefit. Known cost versus unknown variables. I am a very significant unknown variable. The boy has brass, he says finally. The boy is serious? Another long silence. Then he stands up, straightens his jacket, picks up the small leather satchel beside the crate. The debt is forgiven, he says, in the tone of someone making a business decision, not a kind one. We won't be coming back. He walks past me, pauses at the door. Tell me one thing, he says. I wait. Who trained you? I look at him. No one worth remembering, I say. He leaves, and I stand in the empty shed for a moment, listening to the night sounds settling back into their normal patterns, and I breathe out slowly. That worked. It worked because I pushed the right pressure points and held every piece of myself steady when the room was calibrating what I was worth. It worked because 15 years of my first life built an instinct for exactly how much force a situation needs. I walk back to the main house. Mira is waiting in the side corridor, as agreed. She looks at me, looks at my face, looks at the absence of blood or injury or any sign of drama. Done, she says. Done. And Evander is free. He should probably never know exactly what happened, if you can manage that. She absorbs this. Then something shifts in her expression, something I haven't seen from any member of this family yet. Not calculation, not distance, not the careful evaluation she usually puts between herself and the world. Something that looks, in the dim corridor light, a little bit like awe. She covers it quickly, goes back to her composed, controlled face. But I saw it. You need to understand something, she says carefully. I've been watching you since the banquet, and you are not what anyone in this house thinks you are. No, I agree. I'm not. What are you? I think about the question, about the honest answer, which I can't give, about the useful answer, which might be anything. And then I decide that with Mira, halfway honest is probably the best I can do. I'm someone who's decided not to be invisible anymore, I say, and I need at least one person in this family who knows that's a deliberate choice. She looks at me for another long moment. All right, she says quietly, then I'm that person. And just like that, without any ceremony or declaration, I have an ally in the Solcrest house. My first one, and probably the most important one. Over the following weeks, things move. They move carefully, precisely, at a pace I'm setting deliberately. In the training yard, I continue advancing. The 60% becomes 70, becomes 80. Calyx is noticing, Breck is definitely noticing. One afternoon after a particularly pointed sparring session, Breck pulls me aside and says, with the directness of an old soldier, "You're holding back." Yes, I say. Why? Because the wrong moment to show everything is worse than not showing it at all. He looks at me for a long time, then he nods, once, and goes back to the rest of the unit without another word. He doesn't report it to Harvin. I'm not certain why. Maybe he's curious to see what I'm building toward. Maybe he respects the strategy, even if he doesn't understand the full picture. Either way, his silence is a gift I don't waste. The mana core unlocks to roughly 40% by the end of the 6th week. I can feel the shape of it now. It's not standard, not the clean geometric form that noble family cores tend to produce. It's layered, dense, the kind of structure that takes shape not from training exercises and magical theory, but from raw, sustained suppression applied over years. It's going to be extraordinary when I let it fully open. But fully open is not yet. Not even close to yet. The 7th week brings the event that reshapes everything. A delegation arrives from the Imperial Academy, the Empire's premier institution for gifted young nobles and exceptional commoners. Every few years they make rounds of the great houses, looking for candidates worth recruiting. They come with testing equipment, evaluation forms, and the particular self-importance of people who represent an institution powerful enough to ignore normal social rules. The lead evaluator is a woman named Instructor Kala, 40, sharp, with deep knowledge circles under her eyes from too many years of testing too many underwhelming candidates. She has a reputation for brutal honesty and zero patience for political performance. I like her immediately. The testing takes 3 days. All 4 Solcrest children are evaluated. Calyx, Evander, Mira, and then, almost as an afterthought, me. The family doesn't expect anything from my evaluation. I can see it in the way Harvin's advisor barely bothers to arrange a time slot. The way Calyx doesn't even look up when my name is added to the schedule. The first 2 days I spend watching the others go through their tests. Calyx performs brilliantly and knows it. Evander does well but not memorably, which seems to genuinely relieve him. He's not interested in the Academy's attention. Mira is precise and controlled and does exactly well enough to be impressive without drawing the kind of scrutiny she doesn't want. My testing is scheduled for the last session of the 3rd day. Late afternoon. Instructor Kala looks mildly tired when I walk in. Name and age, she says. Dorian Solcrest. 12. She looks at her records, finds my file. Something in her expression flickers. She's found the 3 failed awakening tests. Mana detection first, she says. Standard procedure. She activates the testing stone. I let it find what I've been carefully allowing it to find. Not the full core, not the depth of it, but enough. Enough to register clearly on the stone. Enough for Kala's expression to shift from tired to alert. That's a significant reading for a suppressed core, she says. I've been working on it. Suppressed since childhood? Effectively, yes. She leans forward. She's no longer tired. What's the depth? I couldn't tell you precisely. She does 3 more tests, each one designed to gauge the scope and structure of a mana core at different calibration levels. Each one comes back more interesting than the last. I watch her assemble the picture in real time. I watch her realize that what she's looking at doesn't match standard metrics. How are you doing this? She says finally. It's not skeptical. It's genuinely curious. I don't know how to explain it, I say truthfully. It's been happening on its own. That's not entirely a lie. The core was already there. I didn't create it. I just stopped hiding it. Kala sits back, looks at me with an expression that I recognize. It's the expression of someone re-evaluating every assumption they came in with. I'd like to see your combat evaluation, she says. So we go to the small training hall adjacent to the testing rooms. And there, for the first time in my second life, I stop holding back. Not fully, but close. I'm still a 12-year-old body and I respect its limitations. But the precision is mine. The instinct is mine. The movement economy, doing exactly what's needed, nothing wasted, nothing telegraphed. That's 15 years of my first life pressed into muscle memory. I work through the standard combat evaluation forms, and then I work past them, because Kala keeps gesturing for me to continue, and so I continue, and somewhere around the 7th minute I realize there's a small audience gathering in the doorway. Harvin is there. Calyx is there. Breck is there. They're all watching a 12-year-old move like a ghost in a training hall. I stop when Kala holds up her hand. Complete silence. Then Kala says, very carefully, to the room at large, "Who has been training this child?" Nobody answers. Because nobody has. Not really. Not anything that accounts for what they just watched. I look at Harvin. He looks back at me. And for the 3rd time in these few weeks, I watch something complicated happen behind his eyes. Something that looks like a man confronting the scale of how badly he miscalculated something that mattered. Nobody trained me, I say. I paid attention. Instructor Kala turns back to me. Dorian Solcrest, she says. I'm recommending you for the Academy's advanced track. I'll need your father's agreement. Yes, Harvin says, before she even fully turns to him. Before anyone asks. Yes, he goes. And something in the room shifts. Something permanent. Because when Duke Harvin Solcrest speaks with that particular tone, certain, immediate, final, it means the family line has changed. It means the youngest son at the end of the table is not at the end of anything anymore. Calyx looks at me. His expression is the most complex thing I've seen on his face yet. Not angry, not jealous. Something older than either of those. Something that looks like reassessment. Mira catches my eye from across the room. She raises one eyebrow, just slightly. I almost smile. Almost. The official offer arrives the next day. A letter with the Imperial Academy's seal, addressed to Dorian Solcrest, requesting his enrollment in the next intake of the Advanced Division. The household receives it with the kind of energy that comes from an unexpected earthquake, people scrambling to process the new reality, to figure out what it means for the structure they thought they understood. Dorian Solcrest is still at the estate. He extended his visit for political reasons, as he always does, wearing out his welcome at the Solcrest house because the alternative is going home to his considerably less comfortable provincial holdings. He finds out about the letter at dinner. His face does something extraordinary. I watch it happen across the table, the same table where I held a butter knife to his throat 3 weeks ago, and I watch him try to process the fact that the child he called a stain on noble society has just been selected for the most prestigious academic program in the empire. He opens his mouth, looks at me, closes his mouth. I put a bite of food in my mouth and chew calmly. He tries again. Something comes out this time. Well, it's good. The family could use. Thank you, Lord Varen, I say politely. I'll remember your early confidence in me. The table goes absolutely quiet. Mira coughs into her napkin. Harvin looks at me. His mouth twitches. For the first time in my memory of this man, in any version of my memory, Duke Harvin Solcrest almost smiles. Varen doesn't speak again for the rest of dinner. That evening, after the meal, I walk to the east wing windows and look out at the estate grounds in the dark. The lights are coming on across the gardens. Somewhere out there, the shed where I met the Thornwatch contact is sitting empty and forgotten. Evander is sleeping, unaware that his debt has been quietly dissolved. Mira is already planning, I'm certain of it, already building the next steps from this new position. Calix is somewhere in the training yard even at this hour, pushing himself harder because someone gave him a reason to. And I'm here, 12 years old, with a mana core the size of something that hasn't been seen in the Solcrest line in 3 generations. With a body that still needs time, with a mind that has 15 years of the Empire's darkest corners mapped and filed and ready, with a family that is, for the first time, starting to actually look at me. I press my hand flat against the cold glass of the window. On the other side, the night air is still, and the garden paths are lit by small lanterns that have burned in this estate since before I was born, in either life. There's something almost peaceful about it, something that almost makes me believe the word home could attach to a place again. Almost. Because I know what's out there. I know the shape of what's moving in the dark beyond this estate's walls. I know the timeline of events that ended my first life, and the rough contours of when similar events will begin building toward their conclusions in this one. And I know something else, something I've been turning over in the back of my mind since the first night I opened my eyes in this body. In my first life, I was the best blade the Veilborn ever had, and they still won. They still built toward whatever they were building. My death didn't stop it, didn't even delay it. One ghost removed from the board doesn't change the game when the game has been running for decades, and you only ever knew one piece of it. This time, I know more pieces. I know more of the board, and I have time. This was never going to be the comfortable path. I knew that going in. I knew that waking up in this body, in this house, with everything I know and everything I carry, was never going to lead to something simple. The Veilborn still exists in this timeline. Whatever they're building toward, they haven't built it yet. I have years before the event I couldn't stop in my first life. And somewhere out there, whoever is running them is moving pieces on a board I understand better than anyone. And the Thornwatch pulling on an insignificant second son of a noble house for financial leverage? That's not random, that's pattern. That's the kind of groundwork you lay 2 or 3 steps before something much larger. I push away from the window, roll my shoulders. Feel the monocore pulse, steady and deep and patient, waiting for the moment I let it off its leash. That moment isn't tonight. Tonight I sleep. Tomorrow I begin preparing for the academy. And the day after that, I start pulling on the threads I can already see. Threads connected to things I know are coming that no one else in this empire is positioned to see. In my first life, I was a weapon that someone else aimed. In this one, I'm the one who chooses the target. The acceptance letter is sitting on my desk. The academy begins in 3 months. And somewhere in the capital, in the layers of shadow and power I know better than the back of my hand, the Veilborn is already planning something they think nobody can see. They're going to be wrong about that. They have no idea I'm coming.